Well, hello everybody, how are you doing this fine day? I hope you're enjoying your week. Guess what? I made a poll. That's right, I decided to go out of my way to bestow upon the people my generosity by allowing them to vote on what video I might do next. And as I was reading through the comments of that poll, I saw a particular comment that really put me in a bit of a kerfuffle, saying that I was going to go out of my way to choose whatever people didn't pick just out of spite. Just to piss people off on purpose. What kind of person do you guys think I am? Well, for your information, that is not true in the slightest. I was gonna pick Bully regardless of what y'all voted on. But reality itself bent around my will and decided to let Bully win anyway, so, you know, it just kind of worked out. So you guys know the drill. Gonna take a bunch of random assholes and throw them in the Bully universe and see how they could survive. Now, it should be noted that this survival challenge is going to be a little less of a survival challenge since people aren't going to really be under threat of death here. People don't really die in the Bully universe, but it's more so going to be about how exactly would they deal with being in a school that's just this fucking awful. What will they do? What relationships will they form? What enemies will they make? All of that is going to be talked about in this here video. And if you enjoy the video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. But I've wasted enough of your time. Let's get started. So the location that our survivors are going to find themselves in is a little school known as Bulworth Academy. Said multiple times in the game to be the most dangerous school in the entire country. And I gotta say, for a company like Rockstar who made Grand Theft Auto, the writers of this game are unbelievably optimistic when it comes to the state of the American school system. Because this is the farthest thing from the worst school in the country. I mean, yeah, it's got bullying and shit, but my school had several gangland murders happen. And I know I didn't go to the worst school in the country. You can't even say this was like a recent school shooting thing because I haven't been in school in like 15 years. There is not a single death throughout the entire story of Bully. So just know going in that despite this being the most dangerous school in the country, that doesn't really mean much in the Bully universe. This is a pretty tame universe in terms of how dangerous the schools are. So what does Bulworth Academy have? Well, it's a boarding school, which means all of our survivors are gonna have to actually live at the school and sleep in the dorms and all that good shit. And the school is absolutely filled to the brim with all manner of, they're called cliques in the game. You know, you got like jocks and nerds and greasers and preppies and all that kind of stuff, but they're really not cliques. They're more like gangs because they're all violent assholes who like to jump people, beat the shit out of people, bully people. They're gangs. And the strength of these gangs vary wildly, but basically the whole concept of Bulworth, the whole reason why this place isn't that pleasant is because there's a bunch of strong people that pick on a bunch of weak people. If you show up at the school, you're gonna be instantly hated and get the living shit kicked out of you pretty fucking often. This is what happens to the main character of the Bully games, Jimmy Hopkins, who, by the way, will not be a part of this challenge. He's not in here at all because our main characters will be replacing him in the story. So no going to Jimmy and begging for help and having him come along and beat the shit out of all your enemies for you, which is something that happens very commonly in the game. This is an alternate universe where Jimmy Hopkins never showed up at the school. Now, for the most part, going over the physicals of the characters involved in this game aren't really relevant. They're basically human level characters. No character in Bully is punching through a brick wall or Kamehameha waving a fucking car into dust. Nothing like that happens. They're just regular people. Really, the only thing that's gonna matter is their level of skill when it comes to fighting. And that varies pretty wildly. Most of the bullies in Bulworth have at least some form of fighting ability and are capable of beating the absolute dog shit out of tons and tons of weaker people within the school, basically non-combatants. However, the most skilled people in the school are a totally different story. They're actually capable of fighting any number of other bullies, up to like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 of them at a time, beating the living shit out of every single one of them. This is going to be characters like Biff Taylor, who is a preppy but also the boxing champion of Bulworth, who originally was kind of a nerd and was made fun of a lot, but he got sick of that shit, so learned how to box, became the best, and now he's considered the right-hand man to the leader of the preppies and one of the best fighters in the school. Then you have his rival Johnny Vincent, who has stated on multiple occasions to constantly fight Biff Taylor to a standstill. It's just something they keep doing. They can't stand each other's guts and they always get into fights. And Johnny is the leader of the Greasers. Now, one good thing about Johnny is that he's actually not that bad of a dude. I mean, he's still kind of a bully, but it's really more so due to his insecurities and the fact that he's super jealous about this girlfriend Lola that he thinks is constantly cheating on him, and it makes him lash out at people who don't really deserve it. But if he does learn to respect you, which he will do if you just treat him with respect as well, then it's not really much of a problem, just don't piss him off, basically. Then you have Russell Northrop, which is just a straight up bully. He just likes picking on people, and he doesn't really understand why he shouldn't do that. There's really no way to get around it. He's a giant fucking retard. He's just really, really stupid, and he bullies people because he doesn't know any better. But he's also built like a brick shithouse, and he's physically probably the strongest character in the entire game. Very few, if anyone, actually wants to mess with Russell. And at the top of that list is the most dangerous person in all of Bullworth is going to be a man by the name of Gary Smith. He is a narcissistic, paranoid sociopath who deeply enjoys the suffering of other people. He believes that friends are for the weak. He often tortures people, both psychologically and physically. He beats on people who are weaker than him constantly. He manipulates everyone around him. He's a compulsive liar, and he does all of this different stuff just because he can. He likes doing it. He is a sociopathic character. He is one of the most socially intelligent characters of the entire game, able to manipulate dozens upon dozens of people into doing pretty much whatever he wants them to do, on top of being physically skilled enough to get into a long, drawn-out fight with Jimmy Hopkins, who is the strongest person in the entire school. His goal throughout the game is to completely take over Bullworth Academy and essentially rule over the school, and he damn near succeeds if it wasn't for Jimmy Hopkins. Like, there's no way this motherfucker doesn't torture animals on his off time. Like, that's the type, we're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer levels of characterization here. He is by far the biggest threat that any of our survivors are going to have to face over the course of this story, and it's very unlikely that our survivors are not going to have to deal with him at some point or another. And that's just some of the threats our characters are going to run into at Bullworth Academy. See, Bully was one of the first games that actually had every single character in the game have their own name and personality and voice actor and all that. That thing that the Elder Scrolls games tried to start doing later on. Well, Bully had that shit in the bag first. So there's actually a shit ton of fucking characters in this game, and I'm not going over all of them. Those are the big threats, but if other ones become important, I'll pull those in too. Like, I named Russell as a bully, but there's like 10 named bully type characters that aren't actually in with any of the other cliques. But none of them are as strong as Russell, so if somebody can take on Russell, they should be able to take on all the other ones too. You get it. It's the whole thing. I'm giving you the top of the universe here, not every single character. If those characters become important over the course of this video, I will bring them up and talk about them. And that's basically all the challenges they're going to have to deal with when they go to Bullworth Academy. They're going to have to deal with near countless bullies, incredible levels of Machiavellian manipulations trying to get them to do shit they don't want to do. They're going to get dragged into cliques they don't want to get dragged into, or they're just going to become the bitches of the school who are constantly beat down every day. You know, now that I think about it, this challenge is a lot like my Oz challenge, except, you know, less rape. First up on the chopping block, we have Daniel LaRusso from the Karate Kid series. Originally from the very, very shitty New Jersey, Daniel moves to the even shittier California for some fucking reason, and then starts getting bullied by an extraordinarily wealthy gang of strip mall karate enthusiasts. Okay. Well, they start terrorizing for a while and kicking the ever-living shit out of him again and again and again, and he tries to fight back a little bit, doesn't work out the best. Anyway, he eventually meets an old hermit dude by the name of Mr. Miyagi, who then teaches him in real karate so that he can fight back against the strip mall karate enthusiasts and overcome his fear of the strip mall karate enthusiasts. And then there's 2 more movies and a TV show. So I'm having a bit of an issue right now when it comes to this section of the video, because usually I like to take characters when they're at their absolute strongest, you know, put them in there when they can do the best they possibly can. The problem is that this is high school, and these are high schoolers. And Daniel LaRusso is only a high schooler in the first Karate Kid movie, where he's at his weakest. By Karate Kid 2, he's done with high school and he's shopping around for colleges to go to. So, what exactly do I do here? Do I just pretend that he's not out of high school and just take him at like Karate Kid Part 3 or some shit? Or do I use the weakest version of Daniel LaRusso in Karate Kid Part 1? Oh man, this is one of those life-changing decision moments, you know, where you're gonna make a decision and it will alter who you are as a person from that point on. And when I'm faced with those kind of decisions, I just don't make them. I'm just gonna keep talking, and we'll wing this bitch. We'll see what happens. So just to be clear, something that is going to be for sure is he is not going to have the assistance of Mr. Miyagi when he is sent to Bullworth. That shit's not fair. He's not gonna have fucking pep talks every time he loses a fight and then gain the friendship power up. That's not happening. It's just gonna be him on his own, but he's gonna have the training with Mr. Miyagi. So how exactly is it gonna work out when he arrives here? Well, just like everybody, he's going to instantly start getting fucking bullied and beat on and all this kind of shit. But unlike most people who show up at Bullworth, he's actually going to be able to fight back quite a bit, as he does have this martial arts training. The first time a bully actually comes to him, he will be able to stand up for himself and beat them up. And remember, this is Daniel LaRusso when he's younger, in his sort of high school years, so he doesn't have this whole you strike first sort of mentality that he gets when he gets older. He's a lot more quick to anger and a lot more quick to violence in the original Karate Kid movies than he is later on. As a high school student, Daniel was far less likely to try and talk himself out of situations. And in fact, oftentimes he would actually start shit with people before they started shit with him. I'm not saying he's going to go out of his way to fuck with people who have never fucked with him before. Like, you have to fuck with him first initially, but if you're not currently fucking with him and you fucked with him in the past, he will go out of his way to fuck with you. He's shown doing this on several occasions throughout the initial Karate Kid series. And sadly for Daniel, this is actually going to hurt him quite a bit, since he's really only shown solving any of his problems through actual physical combat. He doesn't solve his problems through talking or creating allies with other people. It's literally just fighting. This is something that a character like Jimmy Hopkins from Bully was really good at. Jimmy would whoop a character's ass if they fucked with him, but after he whooped their ass, he would always try to talk them into not fighting him anymore, and basically like, hey, do you want to be cool now? Like, since we got into the fight, it's over, cool? Daniel never had that in the original movies. The only person that he ever fought that he was an enemy against who became a pseudo ally, kind of, was Johnny Lawrence, and it wasn't because of anything that Daniel said. It was because Johnny felt bad about them cheating during the tournament and decided to start treating him better from that point on. Daniel doesn't have this sort of peace negotiating ability that Jimmy Hopkins has. At least not in the initial movies. In the show, when he's an older man, yes, but not the high school version that we're using. And this means that Daniel is going to have to get in far more fights than Jimmy did, because when he fights someone, win or lose, he'll probably have to fight that person again later on. Without that ability to make peace with people, he's gonna run into some problems. And more importantly than that, Daniel's not gonna be the best fighter in this school, not even close. Even Daniel in the third movie, when he's at his absolute strongest, is not that good at fighting. If you really take a second to think about the plot of the Karate Kid movies, you start to realize that Daniel's not actually that good of a fighter. The first film has him enter a local martial arts tournament where just a couple of schools get involved, and yes, he does fight his way through, but with great effort and usually a lot of stuff helping him out. People may not like me saying this, but I think that if Daniel and Johnny fought again, Johnny would have won. In that initial Karate Kid Part 1 tournament, Johnny was the better fighter. He had more skill and more experience. The reason why Johnny lost was a couple of reasons. One, the tournament counted Daniel's final kick to Johnny's face as a point when they already established previously that hits to the face were illegal. However, he was still given the point for some reason. You also have the fact that Johnny was feeling really bad about fighting against Daniel and didn't like hurting his leg and fighting in this very unsportsmanlike way. He no longer wanted to fight by the time they got into that last round. And due to this, Johnny held back significantly and kind of hesitated when it came to that final fight. In fact, when you see the final crane kick that he does to Johnny, you can see that when he steps forward, Johnny actually hesitates and stops, and that's when he gets kicked in the face. He didn't actually want to go after Daniel at this point. I don't think that Daniel was a better fighter than Johnny here. And later on in the series, where Daniel has to actually fight like national champions and not just people around his house like he did in Karate Kid Part 1, he loses horribly. Despite Daniel being vastly more skilled in Karate Kid Part 3 than he was in Karate Kid Part 1, he did not stand a chance against Mike Barnes. Mike purposefully gave Daniel all of the points except for one so that he can cause as much pain as humanly possible, because that's what Silver told Mike to do. Daniel LaRusso only actually got 1 point against Mike in that whole fight, and it didn't even physically hurt him. Mike was just like annoyed that he allowed a single hit through, and he doesn't even look in pain in that scene. If Mike didn't purposely give up all his points to Daniel at the behest of Silver, Daniel would have stood absolutely no chance against Mike. None whatsoever. Daniel, during the Karate Kid trilogy, never at any point has to fight anyone significantly larger than him. He never has to fight more than one person at a time, and the few times that it does happen, he gets his ass beat. He loses against national champions. He can't fight against adults at all. He's just not that particularly skilled at combat. When you compare that over to the bullies in Bully, you have bullies who can literally take on 10 people at a time and take them out without that much effort. They're They're just vastly more skilled and honestly just tougher than Daniel is. If we were using Daniel LaRusso in the show where he's an adult, he would do a lot better and also go to prison for child abuse, but he would do considerably better because in that show he is shown fighting against multiple people at a time, and he does have this sort of peace talks where he tries to make good relationships out of his fights. He tries to bring people together at that point in his life, but he doesn't in high school. He's kind of a cocky hothead who rushes into fights way before he's ready for them. And a consistent theme of the story of Daniel LaRusso throughout all three movies is his fear of the things that he has to deal with. At the end of Karate Kid Part 1, he wants to keep fighting after he hurts his leg because he's tired of being scared of these assholes who keep fucking with him. In the third movie, it's the same situation. During his fight with Mike Barnes, he wants to give up because he's too scared to fight Mike because Mike's better than him. Mr. Miyagi is the one who has to talk him into not quitting, and the reason is because he says if you want to quit, you can quit, but you don't quit out of fear. Fear is a consistent issue that Daniel has, and without Mr. Miyagi to be there and talk him through it, when he starts fighting these bullies who are considerably more skilled than him, that fear is going to come back up, and he's not going to be able to get over it. Basically, Daniel's kind of going to become a bitch in this school. He would basically be physically equal with one of the lower tier bullies that Jimmy beats like 10 of in the game. When compared to characters like Russell and Gary, he's not going to stand a chance, and when he fights against them, that fear is going to pop back up, and he's just not going to be able to overcome it. So, yeah, I don't think that Daniel LaRusso is going to have a good time at Bulworth Academy. Next up, we have Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. Macher. I don't know how to pronounce that name, I'm not gonna lie. The original killers from the Scream franchise. So, once upon a time, Billy was like a regular kid who had a loving family and all this kind of shit, and then this chick came in, this home-wrecking whore showed up and decided to fuck his dad, and then tore his whole family apart, and his mother left, and he was all sad about it, and then he decided this whole Machiavellian plan that he would rise up and become a serial killer and take revenge on the person who fucked his dad, ruined his life, and then for some reason do the same shit to her daughter and a bunch of other people, whatever. And then Stu, his best friend, was like, hey bro, I'll do it too, because peer pressure is a bitch. And that's the story of Billy and Stu. Don't fucking ask me, I don't know. So how are Billy and Stu gonna do at Bulworth Academy? They're gonna do fucking ass. So here's the thing, if you ever seen Scream movies, you're gonna realize something very consistent. The killers, the actual Scream killers, fucking suck at killing people. The only reason why they're capable of doing it is because the people they're killing are even stupider than they are. Billy and Stu are clumsy, not particularly bright, don't particularly think things out through very well, don't have a really good escape plan for when they are eventually inevitably caught, and they're not really that tough. Like, they can't fight. Throughout the course of the entirety of the Scream movies, at no point does anyone just turn around to fight the regular basic bitch dude in a Ghostface costume. They kick him away and they run and all this kind of stuff, always to their death. But I mean, Ghostface is just a dude with a knife. If you have a particularly good fighter that just turns around, looks at Ghostface and says, come at me bitch, we're doing this, they would easily fucking lose. It's just that these movies are always filled with bitches and dumbasses. I mean, the main cop of the movie literally has a parody version of him where they make him fucking retarded because he's kind of retarded in the movie. So how exactly is this going to work out when they enter Bulworth? Well, there's a couple of things that's going against them right out the gate. For one, they're only really capable of killing people by getting them alone, usually attacking them in their house. And because the small town that the Scream movies take place in is a small town in the country, all these houses are like miles away from anybody, so you can scream and yell and jump out your window and it's not really going to do anything. The killer can still get to you and kill you before you're able to get away. In the newer movies, that sort of changes and they're in a neighborhood and the killer just gets away because the cops are, again, retarded. But in Bulworth Academy, that's not really possible. It's a boarding school and everyone stays in dorms. So everyone is right there next to each other. I mean, they literally sleep in rooms with dozens of other boys. So how are the Ghostface killers supposed to get around all of this and start killing people in the middle of the night if they're constantly surrounded by a bunch more people? The opportunity to kill will just be considerably less than it is in the Scream movies. On top of that, the actual people that they're going to have to kill are considerably tougher than anyone that exists in the Scream movies. I mean, in the game Bully, these kids beat the living shit out of each other with bats and pipes and all sorts of shit, and there are individual characters that can take on groups of these people at a time. A fucking dude in a mask with a knife is not going to be something that they've never dealt with before. In fact, all of the greasers pretty much carry knives on them at all times. So if you go to kill a greaser, well, now you got a fucking 50-50 shot. He's got the same goddamn weapon you do. And if y'all fight, he's probably gonna win. What's gonna end up happening is that the Ghostface killers are gonna kill a woman at first, because that's how these movies always start. They always kill a woman. Probably a pretty popular one that's gonna start like a lot of discussion in the school. Probably the head of the cheerleaders or that Mandy bitch from the preppies. And then maybe they might kill one or two other people after that, but they really don't have a lot of options. I mean, really it's just the women and the nerds. When they start killing anybody tougher than a nerd, preppies, jocks, greasers, whoever, they're gonna get their fucking asses beat really easily. I mean, fuck, Billy is an emotional train wreck, and Stu, while he's not retarded, he's not like Russell, he's like that 5 points just shy of getting into a normal school. Like, his mom super had to fuck the dean in order to get him into Bulwark, for sure. He ain't the smartest tool in the shed is what I'm saying. I mean, for fuck's sakes, every single one of the preppies are in a goddamn boxing club where they beat the living shit out of each other, and some of them are so skilled they can take on all the rest of the boxers at the same time and still win. There's no trained boxers in any of the Scream movies. There isn't a single person who can actually fight in them. Billy and Stu will be dealing with essentially an entire school of people who are all more skilled than all the people that they've ever killed combined. They might last a couple of days, get 2 or 3 kills, and then eventually get easily found out and beaten the living shit out of. Probably murdered. It's not really gonna be even an easy thing. I mean, it's gonna be super, super not cool. The only thing I can really think of that would be super interesting is if Gary found out they were murdering people, and then because he's a sociopathic fucking nightmare, he might actually talk them into killing people with him and use them to try to take over the school by sort of being the brains behind their whole murder thing. Because in the movies, there's this really fucking stupid retcon where in Scream 3, you find out that Billy and Stu were only killing people because this guy basically talked them into it, and they were actually being controlled by this whole guy. It's a fucking stupid story point, and it really lessens the characters of Billy and Stu, but it is canon, it's in the movies, so I gotta go with it. I could see Gary taking over that role and basically controlling what they do, and with him guiding them, being more intelligent about it, and telling them who to kill and when, perhaps they can get a lot farther, and Gary might actually be able to use them in order to take over Bulwark. Outside of that, if they're just doing what they normally do, going around killing people and, you know, having this plot to like fake everybody's deaths and make it seem like they were victims or whatever, it's not gonna work. They're not gonna get far at all. They're gonna get their asses kicked by basically everybody. Next up, we have Marty McFly from Back to the Future series, and before you ask, no, he is not getting the Mandalorian. No fucking time travel in this challenge. It's just Marty. Just regular high school Marty, although a version of Marty that is used after the events of Back to the Future, so he has all his character development and shit. So Marty is basically the exact opposite of Daniel LaRusso. Daniel's whole storyline is about getting over his fears, which he never really does. Even in the show on Netflix currently, like the currently running show, he still shows that he has tons of fear and trauma about all the shit that happened when he was a kid. That's what started all these fucking problems. I mean, the reason he started his school was because he had a fucking panic attack after he found out that Cobra Kai was coming back. Like, he still has that fear. Marty doesn't have any fear. Like, he's the most courageous character on this list. A big part of his story is just how fearless he is. He will jump headfirst into any situation that needs to be jumped into. He will fight against people considerably larger than him that he knows he doesn't stand a chance against winning. He'll fucking jump on a hoverboard and get into a fight with a car while he's on a hoverboard. Why? You're gonna fucking die. He's basically what I would imagine Indiana Jones being in high school. That's essentially Marty McFly. His story isn't so much about him growing and becoming braver. He's already maximum fucking bravery levels at the start of the series. His whole thing is more about his pride and getting over like how people view him, and that's like the whole thing about calling him chicken. And like, bro, why do you care so much? It's fine. We all know you're not chicken. You just started shit with like 4 cyborg dudes. We get it. You're not scared. You ain't got nothing to prove. So how is Marty McFly gonna do if he enters Bulworth Academy? Well, I'll tell you this much. He ain't running from nobody. It doesn't matter how many people fuck with him, how many people beat the shit out of him. He is never gonna stand down. He's never gonna give up. He's always gonna stand his ground and face off against the people who are coming at him. But it's also important that he's not stupid either. And I know pride is a big part of his character, but it's not that big. Like, for instance, when Biff shows up and starts fucking with him and George, he'll punch Biff in the face and start problems with him. Like, he will be the first one to strike if Biff comes starting to threaten him or picking on someone like George, who's his father from the past. It's the whole thing if you haven't seen the movies. I don't know why the fuck you haven't seen them, though. Like, go see them, seriously. They're fucking classics. However, after he punches Biff, he doesn't feel a need to stand there and get into a fucking fist fight with someone 3 times his size that he knows is gonna beat the shit out of him. No, he fucking runs, hauls ass, and then figures out a way to overcome them while he's fucking running away. Because it's like, okay, I can't beat this guy in a fight, so what do? And in that particular case, he jumps on a skateboard and tricks Biff into running into a fucking manure truck. And this is kind of the way he deals with everything. He stands his ground, he fights back, he's willing to fight, but he's not stupid enough to stand there and fight someone he knows he'll lose against. Now, some of you might be looking at this like this is a very cowardly action, and like he's kind of a bitch for not standing his ground and actually fighting the person. But I'm gonna tell you right now, if you're saying that, you haven't been in a lot of fights. You're fucking stupid if you're gonna willingly go and fight in someone else's ballpark. No, you always force them to fight in yours. And this is something that Marty is really, really good at, and he does it all the fucking time. And this is where Marty will excel in Bulworth Academy. No, he is not as good of a fighter as Jimmy Hopkins. He's not even as good of a fighter as Daniel LaRusso. But unlike Daniel LaRusso, who will stand there and try and fight against these people and fucking lose and get his ass beat and get terrified, Marty's basically the opposite. He's not going to stand there. He's not going to fight them if he knows he can't win. He's not going to be terrified of them either. He's going to do whatever he thinks he's going to need to do in order to overcome the challenges that he can overcome. Will he be able to overcome them all the time? No. Will he be able to overcome them most of the time? No, probably not. But he doesn't necessarily have to. I think what's most likely to happen with Marty is he's going to join up with the Greasers. So Johnny, I've already said earlier, the leader of the Greasers, is, for the most part, he's a good person. He's got some anger issues, he's got some jealousy issues, sure, but he respects people who stand their ground. Even if you beat him in a fight, he'll respect you if he feels that you are a respectable person. I find it very hard to believe that he won't respect Marty when he sees how he stands up for himself, stands his ground, and faces things that he clearly doesn't stand a chance against. And there's also a couple of other similarities they have. For instance, Johnny and the Greasers are like master BMX people. Like, they really like bicycles and skateboards and that kind of shit, and they like doing tricks on them and stuff. That's kind of their whole thing. They're also in love with cars, and they like fixing cars, and they're greasers. They're fucking greasers. And I think Marty is probably gonna get along with them pretty well. He's a skateboarder, he does tricks and all that kind of same shit that they do with their bikes, and he also has a big thing in cars. I mean, a large portion of the movies were devoted to him really wanting this truck and this car. The main thing that he's known for is the DeLorean, which is a car. He's a big car guy. I think he's gonna get along really well with Johnny and probably end up joining the Greasers at some point. Not because he's afraid of the other gangs or anything, I just genuinely think they're probably gonna get along and actually become pretty close friends. Marty is never gonna get to the point where he rules the school or dominates the school or is capable of defending the weak of the school like Jimmy did. Jimmy was able to beat literally everyone and get everyone to start behaving themselves and basically end bullying across all of Bulworth. That shit ain't happening with Marty. He doesn't have the fighting skill for that shit, but he will defend those he sees need to be defended because he still has a very heroic spirit. And I think he might even be able to kind of drag Johnny along with him if him and Johnny get along well enough, which I think they do, because Johnny does stand by his friends. Like I said, Johnny's a pretty good dude. He may even be able to kind of shift the Greasers away from bullying and towards being sort of like the defenders for the school. That's something that Jimmy Hopkins actually does do with the Greasers and the whole rest of the school. And again, Marty's not gonna be able to do it with the whole school, but I think he can do it with the Greasers. So overall, Marty will do okay. He won't do fantastically. I don't think he's gonna beat Gary or turn Russell good or any of that shit, but I do think he will find a place in Bulworth where he's not picked on and bullied and ridiculed, and he's just sort of becomes comfortable within the culture that Bulworth has. Yeah, I think he'll be fine. Last up, but certainly not least, we have Ferris Bueller from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And I did not mean to have so many 80s characters on this list. Like, didn't Ferris Bueller and Back to the Future both came out the same year, 1985? I think so. I might be wrong about that. Anyway, this was not purposeful. I made a list of characters that I wanted to put on this list, and it was like a list of like 15 names. And most of them were not from 1980s movies. I just picked them at random of who I wanted to talk about, and they just happen to be 80s characters. I mean, I got Alex DeLarge from Clockwork Orange on that list. I got Wednesday Addams on that list. I got Kick-Ass on that list. Next time I do this, it's not going to be all 80s characters, I promise. This was just a massive coincidence. So, what can I say about Ferris Bueller? Well, we don't really know a lot about Ferris Bueller outside of what we see in the one day that we see him in. If I had to describe Ferris Bueller, he's basically a regular high school kid who dumped all his fucking points into charisma. Every point he had went to charisma, and goddamn, the man can literally charm, trick, or manipulate anyone he wants at any time he wants to. And he gets an entire fucking town to buy into his bullshit throughout the course of the movie. He's got them all wrapped around his finger so fucking tight that he calls off sick for one day, and they write "Save Ferris" on the fucking town's water tower. The goddamn president of the United States can get sick, and ain't nobody writing his shit nowhere. Ferris has insane, superhuman levels of being able to get people to do what he wants to do. I don't know what that power is. It's not mind control. We call it like social influencing or something. His social influencing ability is beyond anything that should be possible in the real world. And because of this, he's not gonna have any troubles anywhere at any point throughout all of Bulwark. Now listen, he can't fight. Ferris Bueller's a pussy. He's got a fucking 25 in charisma, but all of his other points were thrown on nothing. He's got zeros across the board. He has no skills outside of influencing people. However, those influencing skills are so fucking ball-tastically amazing that I don't think that anyone is gonna even want to fight him. All the bullies that come to pick on him, he will likely be able to talk them out of picking on him. He will be able to talk himself out of basically any situation. He will be able to build allies very quickly. He'll get the whole school to fucking love and adore him very easily. He's the only character on this list that can actually get to a point where he rules the entire school like Gary wants to, except he'll do it without ever having to ball a fist. He'll do it without any violence whatsoever. He's just that amazing at manipulating the people around him and just getting people to do what he wants them to do. He's kind of like Gary if Gary wasn't an evil sociopath. Because while Ferris Bueller does manipulate people and he does lie to people, it's not really for the point of making people suffer or to hurt anybody. It's really just for his own enjoyment and entertainment. And as with Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it is specifically to help his friend Cameron from some very, very deep depression. I don't know if any of you guys have actually read the screenplay of Ferris Bueller, but I like reading screenplays. And there was actually a page in the screenplay that did not make it into the movie where the character that Charlie Sheen plays in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, he talks about Ferris Bueller and how, basically, to give some backstory that's not in the movie, Ferris Bueller was once friends with this guy and was trying to guide him into a good path, but he failed, and this guy ended up going and dropping out of school and becoming a drug addict and all this kind of stuff. And then Ferris Bueller saw that in Cameron and knew that that could be where Cameron leads. So the whole movie of Ferris Bueller is about him trying to get Cameron out of his shell and basically succeeding in what he failed at before with the Charlie Sheen character. This page does not show up in the final movie, and that fucking sucks because it removes a big aspect of Ferris Bueller's character where he's actually doing this to help somebody and out of guilt for a previous failure. It just gives Ferris a stronger motivation and a lot more clear characterization of exactly what he's doing and why. So it was just something I always didn't like they took out of the movie. Anyway, with that added context, we know that Ferris Bueller is actually a good person. So yes, he'll manipulate, yes, he'll lie, but he'll do it all for good reasons, and I don't think he's going to be okay with all of these people getting bullied and beat up on. I think he's going to basically do what Tommy Hopkins did, where he fixes the whole school. He's just going to do it without using violence and by essentially talking to people and charming the living shit out of everybody. The only enemy that he's really going to end up having by doing things this way is Gary, because Gary wants control over the entire school, and he wants it for his own sadistic pleasure. It'll basically be like having a Ferris Bueller versus an evil Ferris Bueller. These two characters are both going to have to use their Machiavellian levels of manipulation ability against everyone around them and each other in order to try and see who could take over the school better. In terms of who's better at actually charming people, Ferris Bueller has that shit hands down. While Gary doesn't have a 25 in charisma, it's still pretty fucking high. You know, give him like a 16, 17. It's not bad. He's good at manipulating people for sure. So Ferris Bueller will actually have a challenge when it comes to that. But really the main thing thing that's going to be a problem is Gary can actually physically fight where Ferris Bueller can't. In the game of Bully, Gary had to manipulate events around Jimmy to overcome Jimmy because he knew that he couldn't beat him in a fist fight. When they eventually did get into a fist fight because it was just forced down that path, he did pretty damn well but couldn't actually win. But against Ferris Bueller, he doesn't have to do all this manipulating shit. He could just go beat the living shit out of him. Because unlike Jimmy, Ferris can't fight back. He's not as big of a threat. So it's basically going to become this situation where Gary doesn't actually have to be all that smart or manipulative when he's dealing with Ferris. He can actually rely on his physical, something he couldn't do in the main game. Ferris is going to have to use his charisma to essentially get everybody else around him and in the school to like him and really hate Gary. So the main question is, will he be able to do that? Yeah, the motherfucker's got a 25 in charisma. He can do whatever he wants. He will absolutely be able to talk the jocks, the preps, the greasers, even the bullies into essentially siding with him and going up against Gary. And with Gary having the whole school against him, there's really not a whole lot he can do. In the game, there's nobody who's more manipulative than Gary. He's capable of manipulating events throughout the whole game and is the biggest threat because of this. With someone like Ferris, who's essentially that, but just way better at it, that's not gonna work anymore. You just fucked Gary's whole plans up. If you really think about it, Ferris is kind of Gary's kryptonite. So yes, much like his own school, I think Ferris is going to be able to take control of all of Bullworth. But he's gonna do it by just making pretty much everybody in the entire school absolutely adore him. Because everybody fucking loves Ferris. The man talked his way into getting on a float and starting a goddamn musical number in the middle of New York City. Just with his charisma level. How the fuck is Gary gonna compete with that? Gary's manipulative, but he's not fucking God. And honestly, if you really look at the story of Bully, there are several characters throughout all of that story that are very aware that Gary is no good. He does manipulate a lot of people and he gets a lot of people to be on his side and to trust him, but there are many who still think that he's a sociopath and super fucked up and know that he's manipulating because he's really not that good at hiding his sociopathic nature, which is something he's kind of gonna have to be able to do if he wants to outplay Ferris. So yeah, I mean, overall, Ferris is going to excel very well in Bullworth. And again, he's going to do it without ever having to actually fight. Super impressive. But that's going to be all for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. And always remember, you stay safe out there, you hear?